Imagine waking up one day and not being able to remember the name of your best friend, or walking into your own neighborhood and not being able to find your way back home. Frightening, isn't it? Dementia already affects more than 55 million people worldwide, and the number keeps growing. Many ignore the early signs until they become impossible to hide. In this video, we will explore Margaret's story and delve into crucial aspects of dementia, from the first signs to the hopes for the future. If you've seen something similar happen to someone you love, or even experienced it yourself, this video is for you. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and share this content. This information could save lives. The unexpected visit, the forgetfulness that changed everything. It was an ordinary afternoon at Mrs. Margaret's house. A 72-year-old grandmother, known as the heart of the family's Sunday gatherings. She had a unique talent for turning a simple apple pie into something unforgettable. But that afternoon, as she prepared the ingredients for her famous recipe, something happened. She gathered her utensils, looked at them, and stopped. Her grandson Ethan found her standing still, lost in her thoughts. "Are you okay, Grandma?" he asked. Margaret smiled, but her expression revealed something different. She didn't remember what to do next. At first, the family thought it was just a silly moment. "This happens to everyone," they said. But over time, other incidents began to appear. Margaret repeated the same stories, forgot important appointments, and one day, got lost on her way home from church. These small lapses were dismissed as normal until they started impacting her daily life. According to experts, dementia isn't just a natural part of aging. It's a set of symptoms that affect the brain, impairing memory, language, and reasoning. In Margaret's story, these signs were clear but went unnoticed. The truth is, many people don't recognize the early symptoms of dementia or simply don't want to accept that something is wrong. But what happens when these signs aren't just occasional lapses, when they conceal something much bigger and more challenging? You might think you understand what's happening, but the reality behind it might surprise you. The journey of discovery. Understanding dementia, Margaret wasn't alone in this invisible battle. Her son James began to notice that something more serious might be happening. After the incident where she got lost coming home from church, he decided to take her to the doctor. The consultation revealed something the family didn't expect. Margaret showed clear symptoms of dementia, a condition many have heard of but few truly understand. The doctor explained, dementia isn't a single disease but a general term for cognitive decline that interferes with daily life. There are many types, but the most common is Alzheimer's disease. This information was a shock to James. How could something so devastating start so subtly? He recalled the changes his mother had been showing: difficulty remembering simple words, disorientation, and even inexplicable mood swings. The doctor emphasized that dementia is progressive. In other words, it starts almost imperceptibly, but advances slowly, affecting different areas of the brain. At that moment, James realized he needed answers. He began researching, trying to understand why this was happening to his mother and what could be done. The doctor made it clear that while there is still no cure for many forms of dementia, treatments and lifestyle changes could slow the progression of the disease. But one question lingered in James's mind. How did this start? What is truly causing all of this in my mother? And it's precisely this question that leads us to the next chapter of this story: the hidden culprits. What lies behind dementia? That question wouldn't leave James alone. He needed to understand what was happening to his mother. During another doctor's appointment, he heard for the first time about the types of dementia. It was a revealing moment. Not all dementia is the same. The doctor explained that the most common cause is Alzheimer's disease, accounting for about 60 to 70% of cases. In Alzheimer's, protein plaques build up in the brain, making it harder for nerve cells to communicate, he said. James tried to imagine this as if small blockages were interrupting his mother's thoughts. But that wasn't the only possibility. Vascular dementia, for instance, occurs after small strokes, where insufficient blood flow damages parts of the brain. This could explain Margaret's sudden lapses. Other types mentioned included Lewy body dementia, which can cause hallucinations, and frontotemporal dementia, which affects behavior more than memory. And what about lifestyle? James asked, thinking of the decades his mother had smoked and consumed processed foods. The doctor confirmed that bad habits like poor diet, inactivity, and even chronic stress could increase the risk of dementia. This information was a shock to James. It felt as though every past decision was coming back to demand payment. he began to wonder, am I at risk too? Is my family vulnerable to this? The answers James would uncover next would completely change the way he viewed his own health and his mother's. When memory fades, how it affects everyone around. James realized that his mother's diagnosis was only the beginning of a long journey. Margaret, who had once been independent and full of life, now needed help with the simplest tasks, like remembering to take her medication or even preparing a meal. The effects didn't stop there. James began to notice the emotional toll the situation was taking on the entire family. His youngest son, Lucas, just 10 years old, asked in a confused tone, "Why doesn't Grandma remember my name sometimes?" That question broke James's heart. How could he explain to a child that his grandmother was slowly losing pieces of who she was? Margaret herself was aware that something was wrong. On some days, she grew irritated and frustrated with herself for not being able to do things that had once been second nature. On other days, she cried, mourning what she felt was disappearing. This forced James and his sister Sarah to take turns caring for her while managing their own lives. "It's like every day brings a new surprise and not always good ones," Sarah said during a family meeting. Financial difficulties also began to weigh heavily, as the costs of doctor visits, medications, and home adaptations were significant. Despite everything, the family was determined to care for Margaret with love and patience. But there was one question that no one dared to voice. What would happen when she forgot who they were entirely? James knew he had to act not only to help his mother, but also to prevent other families from going through the same pain. The silent battle, mistakes and challenges in daily care as Margaret's disease progressed. James and Sarah faced a series of unexpected challenges. One of their first mistakes was believing they could handle everything on their own. They wanted to protect Margaret, but, without realizing it, they were overwhelming themselves. For instance, Sarah tried to keep her mother's routine intact, insisting she continue cooking and caring for her plants. However, this only increased Margaret's frustration, as she couldn't remember how to use the stove or which plant needed watering. Another common mistake was downplaying the symptoms. On good days, when Margaret seemed more lucid, James would tell himself, maybe things aren't so bad after all. But these moments of clarity were becoming increasingly rare, and ignoring the reality only made planning harder. They also underestimated the importance of creating a safe environment. One night, Margaret tried to leave the house alone. Fortunately, James was awake and found her in the garden, disoriented. After this incident, they installed extra locks and motion sensors, but realized they could have acted sooner. Caring for someone with dementia requires patience but also strategy. It was only when they joined a support group that they started finding practical solutions and coping better with the emotional impact. Even so, James couldn't stop wondering, is there more we can do to protect our mother, or even prevent this from happening to other members of our family in the future? These questions led James to discover something surprising, that prevention can start before the first signs appear. The power of prevention. Stories that inspire change after months of dealing with the exhausting routine of caring for Margaret. James began reflecting on his own health. He didn't want his children to face the same challenges in the future. That's when he came across a lecture by a renowned neurologist who shared a seemingly unbelievable claim. Up to 40% of dementia cases can be prevented or delayed with lifestyle changes. This was a turning point for James. He started researching what he could do to protect his brain and that of his family. One story that caught his attention was Susan's, a 58-year-old woman with a family history of Alzheimer's. Upon learning she was at risk, Susan completely transformed her lifestyle. She began following the so-called MIND diet, a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diets, rich in leafy green vegetables, berries, nuts, and fish. In addition, Susan exercised 3 times a week, engaging in activities like brisk walks and yoga, which improved her circulation and reduced stress. Another step Susan took was mental stimulation. She enrolled in painting classes, a hobby she had always wanted to explore but never had time for. Studies show that creative and challenging activities help strengthen neural connections and keep the brain active. Inspired by these stories, James introduced small changes into his routine and encouraged his family to do the same. He knew that, even if he couldn't change his mother's past, he had the power to shape the future. But there was still something that unsettled him. Could science one day provide a definitive solution for dementia? James decided to seek this answer, and what he discovered filled him with hope. Beyond the present, the promises of science. James had never been one to follow scientific news, but his mother's struggle turned him into an amateur researcher. He began scouring articles and attending conferences in search of breakthroughs that could change the fate of families like his own. That's how he discovered a promising study led by a renowned institute. Scientists were developing an experimental drug aimed at slowing the progression of Alzheimer's in its early stages. The research involved using a combination of antibodies to target the protein plaques in the brain, one of the main causes of the disease. Although still in the testing phase, the initial results were encouraging. Another advancement that caught James's attention was the use of artificial intelligence for early diagnosis. By analyzing MRI scans with sophisticated algorithms, doctors could detect changes in the brain years before the first symptoms appeared. If we had known this earlier, maybe we could have helped my mum more effectively, he thought. Additionally, James read about innovative therapies, such as non-invasive brain stimulation, which uses gentle electrical impulses to improve cognition in patients with mild dementia. He was also impressed by the growing role of personalized medicine, which tailors treatments based on a patient's genetic profile. What moved James the most, however, were stories of individuals who volunteered for research studies. Many did so not for themselves, but out of hope that these discoveries could benefit future generations. James decided to join this fight, supporting initiatives and awareness campaigns. Still, one question haunted him. What about those who don't yet know what lies ahead? How can we help them before it's too late? This reflection led James to make an emotional plea, closing our journey with a powerful message. You can make a difference. A call to action. James was sitting in the living room, watching his mother Margaret play with the family dog. For a moment, she seemed like the same strong and loving woman he had always known. But then her expression changed, and she asked, "Whose dog is this again?" In that instant, James realized that although he couldn't change his mother's fate, he could shape the future for others. He decided to use everything he had learned to raise awareness among friends, family, and even his local community about the importance of recognizing the early signs of dementia and taking preventive measures. "I thought this could never happen to my family," he said during a community meeting. "But now I see that we are all vulnerable, and we must act before it's too late." He encouraged attendees to get regular checkups, maintain a balanced diet, exercise not only their bodies but also their minds, and seek professional help at the first warning sign. James also began fundraising for research and sharing the stories he had heard throughout his journey. He knew that even the smallest gestures could have a positive impact. We may not be able to change the past, but we can fight to make the future different. As Margaret continued her battle, James understood that the love and support of family were as essential as any treatment. He left us with a message we will never forget. Taking care of our health is not just about us, it's about the people we love and who depend on us. If you haven't taken the right steps yet, the time is now. And now, I ask you, what are you doing today to protect your memory and that of your loved ones? Share your thoughts in the comments and help spread this message. We close our journey with a powerful reflection and an invitation to take action. You can make a difference in the fight against dementia. Subscribe to the channel for more stories and tips that can transform lives. And remember, every act of care makes a world of difference.